Hey, Warren, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
I'm excited to have you on. Tell us who you are, what you do.
My name is Warren Wilansky. I'm the president and founder, I guess that's the title that I go by, of Plank. We are a Montreal-based digital agency. A lot of our work is focused on arts and culture clients, some nonprofit, some higher education, and recently we've kind of opened up a new avenue working on some architectural related projects.
Fantastic. And are you an accidental agency owner?
I would honestly say I'm like the most traditional accidental agency owner story. Stumbled out of communication studies in university, stumbled into some, freelance web development projects for about 18 months or so, and then kind of fell into having just enough freelance work to kind of join up with two other people and found the agency, one of which left after the first 6 months or so. Another one was with us for the first 5 years and then moved on. And then I was the sole owner for a while. And then our first employee, Steve Bissonette, is now a part owner with me in the company as well.
So what was that ride like in the very beginning? Was it just trying to figure out shit? Like I remember when I kind of stumbled into my first couple of clients, I didn't even know what an invoice was.
I mean, I think having, Jason, that's a good question, but having kind of worked at least freelance at other agencies kind of gave me a little bit of a sense. So I wasn't cold, but I definitely didn't feel like we were running a company. Like that's not what it felt like. We just had enough work where, we all kind of knew, but also kind of just almost thought of it as a collective. I mean, I guess that's how I thought of it at first, but in reality, it wasn't a collective. And we, within 6 months or so, had hired our first employee, and then we had some team members. So it became a company, although I probably didn't really take full ownership of running a company until the second partner had left, and then I was running it by myself.
So that was maybe 5-6 years out?
Yeah, pretty much.
And what kind of changed from your mental perspective when you started doing that? Like, was it mainly kind of going, man, this is kind of a real business. Like I need to get serious about it, or, what changed for you?
When you have somebody else, and both of us we were always kind of trading the hot potato back and forth of, okay, no, you'll take care of the business side of things. No, you'll take care of it. No, you and nobody really kind of owned every aspect of it. And I guess it was just that feeling of, okay, there's nobody to kind of push things off to anymore. Kind of like you almost have to take responsibility for this. And I had to accept certain things. I mean, I still think maybe at the time I was still doing some of the design work, which is what really was the side of the website development and design part that I liked. But I really was at that point, I realized that my project that I had to work on was the company itself. And it was that book, I think it was called The E-Myth, that one of those early books that I read, and was that idea of working on the business and not in the business.
Yeah. What did you do to start changing your role? Like, what gave you more confidence or clarity in order to hire people to do the day-to-day operations?
The first thing you start doing is you start finding people who can do the work better than you can. That's the first thing you start doing. In other words, like once we had our first official creative director, it was because, well, that person's a substantially better designer than I'll ever be. Our developers, I mean, I kind of dabbled in HTML and CSS, and then as a result had to learn some basic PHP to kind of build up some a little bit more complex websites rather than just display sites. But I was never really a developer. So as soon as you start hiring people that can be developers that do things better than you, that's the path where I think you start from. And then you start filling out other things with it as well.
Were you like me when CSS came out? Because all of my websites that I would program many years ago before my team started doing it was all in tables. Oh, and then I remember the first time I looked at CSS, I'm like, what is this crap?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you started your company around the same time as mine, but it was pre-CSS. So yes, everything was like spacer GIFs and tables manipulation, and you kind of almost push things across the page.
Oh yeah,
and place them across the page.
Literally, we would build it in like Photoshop, and then slice it up in Photoshop, and then anything you wanted to repeat across the screen, you would like put a background under the TD tags. Like I loved it. I was a master at that. And then CSS came out. I was like, all right, this is time for me to stop designing and for me to do other things.
I mean, that sounds like probably the right choice. I mean, because what ends up happening is you end up getting good at doing something one way, and then it's kind of like the rules are then broken on you. It's kind of like I have to learn a new way to do things now. I mean, I see it in our team. They're constantly still learning and evolving. Every 6 months to a year, there's some new tool.
I know you were talking about recently or the past couple of years, you brought in director level people. So walk me through, how did you make the decision to bring in directors? Because a lot of times, we're just being the leader and we have all these people doing a lot of the work. What got you over that gap? Because there's a lot of people listening right now that, they're managing people. And I'm like, man, we're all the worst leaders. We're horrible at managing people.
There's a few steps that happen there. So the first one is when, the story of Plank years ago that I love telling was, we're a flat organization. Everybody's the same. And as a result, there's no hierarchy. And that sounds on paper like it's not good. It sounded good on paper at the time. In reality, what it meant that there was no chance to kind of level up to something else. In other words, it's kind of like, okay, you're doing your job. Maybe you can be called junior or senior. And then at a certain point, it's like, what's next? The next is just keep doing a great job, which is not always inspiring. And usually what that meant is after a certain amount of time of somebody just doing their job, they are like, I now want to do something else. And if there's nothing in the agency to then strive towards, then you strive out of the agency. So by then creating a little bit more structure, which went against my initial instincts at first, I feel like now my instincts are that was a better idea. In other words, in addition to being able to level up to a different level within your job, now we have different groups. So we have groups like the project management team. We have a front-end development team. We have a design team. And then those teams have a team lead. So then there's somebody who's a leader of that team unto itself. And then when we get to the director level, that happened only in the past couple of years. And part of the reasoning for that was then to give some people who now were at the team lead and find a way to give them their next challenge. That was the initial thinking. And also, it's a way for me to almost give some people in the team the chance to see if they like the feeling of running a company itself, because the director level really is somebody who then can make really senior decisions and can make decisions that, let's say, I would have only been the one to be able to make that decision, or my business partner, Steve, to make the decision. So now we've empowered people to have a different level of authority at the team. And I use authority in a kind of, not in the way that I mean, it's not authority as in you are now, you now have this level of power. It's more authority in that now you are empowered to do something rather than having the power.
So it sounds like all of your directors came from promoting within, or did you bring on? Wow, that's incredible. Because I always found that maybe half of those people, they're really good designers or they're really good developers, but they were horrible at managing a project or really the attention to detail. I kind of treat it as almost like the military, where you have the unenlisted people that are kind of they have a skill set. They're really good at executing that one skill set, but they're not the officer track. Like the officer track is more, the manager to the director to the general, that kind of stuff. And I always ask my team, which track do you want to be on? Because I was like you, going, if you don't have growth for someone in the company, they're going to leave or you're going to demotivate them. So I always was like, which track do you want to be on? And they could switch to. You could try the manager track, but then you're like, man, people are idiots. I gotta go back to just doing my work. I want to be responsible for my stuff, not anybody else. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is that, like, I agree with you. There are two tracks. So we try to encourage both. So there are those who are going towards the manager track, which were the two people we've promoted up to director. And then there's what we call the craft track. In other words, if somebody wants to keep honing their craft, we have to give them opportunities to then increase their skill set on the craft itself.
So I've known people in the past, they'll kind of outline the next job or the next level for them and saying, look, when you do your job, and then 80% of the new job will promote you, rather than them always constantly coming to you or waiting for the annual review. And then they asking you for a raise and that kind of stuff. How did you guys do it?
So, and I might get this wrong because I am not day-to-day involved on that side of things. So I might
we'll get into that next.
But if I do get it wrong, I'm sure somebody on my team could, at some point follow up on that. But I think the best way to describe it is we do still have the annual review. We also have quarterly reviews. So it's more kind of a regular check-in. And when somebody expresses the want to change their skill set, level up to, let's say, senior, we create a path, but the path is not one where they might need to get 80% of the way there to then earn the title. It's more, we have to kind of almost, it isn't like, oh, you now have to live up to becoming senior and then you'll get the title. There's some point along the path where now they're at that level and then they will fill in the rest to get 100% of the way there.
I like that. Do you guys call it yearly reviews or quarterly reviews? Or do you have any cool names for it?
We've gotten we're just at a size where, and I think in some ways we probably could get away with less structure than we have, but I think we've kind of built in a structure so that we could get to a larger size and not feel the growing pain. So, we have HR systems in place. We have an HR software, we have an HR person, so that we almost feel like we have the ready capacity to get to a 40 or 50 person team and we wouldn't be creaking yet underneath it.
Yeah. One of the things I always tell people is don't ever call it a quarterly review or annual review because people think I'm getting reviewed and they don't want to be reviewed. We always called it coaching sessions.
Okay.
Because that's what
nice.
You're really doing. If you looked at it, right? Like going, I'm coaching them to be like, how can they get to the senior level? How can they get to the director level? Wherever they're going, what do I need to actually do? Because then it just frames it a little bit different. Like, so for everyone listening, because every agency I always chat with, and look, we had it too. I didn't realize this until after we sold that I was like, man, we should have called it a coaching session. Because then it was coming in rather than going like, you would lead with all the bad shit, like what they need to improve. And then you would end on the good shit, right? But the person shuts off after you go over the bad shit, always programmed as a human being to remember the first thing. So it'd be like, my God, Oren just told me that I'm horrible at this, and this. But even if you end on like, hey, I love what you're doing here, I'm never going to hear that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's pros and cons to any approach. Like when we do our check-ins, we actually solicit not just so that the HR person or somebody's manager that's giving the comments, we actually try to get people from across the company that maybe work with them to give feedback as well. And on some ways, I like that because then it's more of a peer review. The problem is what ends up happening every so often is I can see people doing it. It's like, because we then will share the feedback anonymously. And then people are playing the game of like, who said that about me, either good or bad. So I think it's an imperfect science. I find that probably the one area that we're always adjusting the most at the company is probably the way that we do kind of reviews, or as you call them, coaching sessions, is we're always kind of tinkering with that to find a way to give the best feedback possible. And it's hard.
Hi there, agency owners. Let me ask you, are you ready to scale your agency without increasing your overhead costs? If yes, then you need to know about E2M Solutions. Now, E2M is the #1 most reliable white label partner for agencies. They specialize in web design, WordPress development, e-commerce, SEO, and content writing. They basically do all the heavy lifting, which frees you up to focus on growing your agency. Now, here's the best part. E2M's just not another vendor. With over 10 years of experience, their team of over 300 experts has a track record of delivering for more than 300 agencies. They're your strategic partner. They deliver on time every time, so you can focus on what you do best. Now, E2M's mission is simple: to help 500 agencies increase their revenue and profit margins with white label services that actually work. And to help you get started, they're offering a special deal, 10% off for the first 3 months, but act fast because it's only a limited time offer. So head over to e2msolutions.com/smartagency to check out their transparent and their flexible pricing. Trust me, if you're ready to grow without burning out, E2M is the partner you've been looking for. That's e2msolutions.com/smartagency. Go check them out and tell them Jason Swank sent you. Yeah, the one feedback I always tell people, so we're just getting back from our agency experience where we get a lot of our agency members, they come out to Colorado to this 100,000 acre ranch. And we were just chatting about asking your team members, and I think everyone on the team needs to do this, of going, what do you want to do more of? What do you want to keep doing? And what do you want to start doing? And they ask it both for yourself, but then also toward your manager, or your manager does it to the person that they're managing. So it's like, look, I want you to do more of this. I'd like you to stop doing this. Like, how can we get around that? And then I want you to start doing this. And it was a really good way where everyone was like, aha. Cause like I had every agency owner ask their team, ask your team, like literally, and everyone on, listening to the show, ask your team this, going, what do you want me to start doing, continue doing, and stop doing as an owner? And you'll be surprised what happens. That's
a good one. I mean, that might be a way for me to frame it, because I try to solicit that. And, sometimes I'm working with, let's say, one member of our team, and I'm like, what's the best use of my time? And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know. Because maybe it's just the way I'm framing by saying that, because it's too open-ended.
Yeah, I think if you change the framing on it, they'll be like, oh, I love, that you're doing this. Because I think a lot of times when you start transforming from the owner of the agency to the CEO, I almost feel like the CEO is kind of I continually feel this way, is like, I'm supporting my team. They're not working for me. I'm working for them. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I drive them more leads so they have for the sales department? How can I give them more assets to the marketing department? How can I, really help streamline the operations and all of these different things that go into it? So I want to talk about that. What are your roles now? Because you've transformed from a CEO, or from an owner to a CEO. Mm-hmm. So what are your day-to-day or weekly roles?
I mean, a lot of my role, and I think is probably where a lot of, let's say, company owners are at, a lot of it is what we call business development, but it's sales. In other words, a lot of it is working with my strategy team. A strategy team are the people who are handling marketing, business development, day-to-day proposal writing, and kind of supporting that. I also recognize that after 25 years, I have the deepest network. I have most of the day-to-day contacts. And truthfully, I think at the end of the day, when it comes time to kind of meet the team, people want to meet who founded the company. People want to talk to me. People want some time with me to understand myself, because chances are, if I mesh with somebody, they're actually meshing with myself, which is the person who kind of set the path for the culture of the company. I mean, the culture of the company is what the 27 people as a group bring, but obviously the direction of it was set by the way that I've wanted this company to start at and continue to go in the different directions it's going in.
I felt like that for many years, but until after I sold, I realized, and I started looking at it from the outside, I was like, you got all the relationships, right? You also have all the stories, right? Which is a huge, huge gap, because you're like, no one can sell like me because I know all the damn stories. Like, how could this one person just coming in really represent us? And I looked at it in two ways. And I go, one way is if I created content where people could get to know myself, like, think about like Gary Vaynerchuk, how he brands himself, how he brands other people in the organization and some of the other team, then people really understand, and they get to know, they feel like they know, like, and trust you, right? When I thought that way, it was so like, if I left, then we couldn't bring in any new business, because people were like, oh, I need to meet Jason, the co-founder of this agency and the CEO. And then, so I was like, if I could brand and put out content, and then if I could look at my methodology in my agency and create stories for each of those different stages that I could share with the team, from the account managers, the strategists, the directors, the salespeople, all that, I was not needed anymore for that stuff. And he totally freed my time.
See, what's interesting is we've come at it in some different ways. In other words, like, if I believe, and and in some ways I do believe, but I almost want to not be that focus as well. But I do believe if somebody wants me to be the first contact or the primary contact, I usually diffuse it pretty soon by saying, but the truth is, at the end of the day, you're not going to be working with me, and that's what, then clients probably know that subconsciously, but they almost have to be made clear. It's like, I want you to meet your project manager so that you buy into them as much or more than me. But the interesting thing on the stories that you're mentioning is like, yeah, and sometimes I feel like, oh, well, I know all the stories of Planck and nobody else could know them as much as me. But the question is, does the story from 18 years ago matter anymore? Probably not. The people who are creating the stories at Planck right now, today's stories are the ones that matter the most. And there's a lot of stories that I still romanticize and I will talk about. And people who have been here for 5 years, it's not a part of their story.
Yeah. Well, you're giving some kind of foundation about how to tell a story, and especially for the ones that don't have a story and they just try to sell on features or just, we should do it because of that, and no reason. So if you just give them like a foundation, they'll eventually build their own stories. Like, when Darby started working for us and he joined the team, right? He really didn't even know what an agency was. Like, that's the hilarious part. But now he's getting on strategy calls with members and doing agency blueprints, and people are loving it. And he has his own stories now to tell. He's been, working with us for almost 4 years now. And so he has his own story. So he didn't care about mine, but I needed to seed it with some of my initial stories. And then it's like, I went from before giving my team the stories to tell, I probably used to work about 60 hours a week. I only work 10 hours a week now. And I love seeing people come into the mastermind I've never heard, I never chatted with, but then I get to know them once they join. And that's a cool thing because your time is very valuable. And if I could put my time more into, creating the content that no one else could create, or building the relationships like you're probably amazing at for 25 years, build those relationships. And it was a game changer for this business. It wasn't a game changer for the past business because I didn't figure it out until after.
Yeah, but you're right there. And I'd say that's one of the things that I enjoy most. I mean, I work with a business development coach, and we've talked through a lot of this. And the thing that I enjoy the most is I enjoy building relationships. I don't see it as selling. People. That's why I think the agency world is hesitant to use the word selling because it makes it sound like, oh, well, it's transactional. But there are relationships that I would get to know somebody and they wouldn't become a client for 5 years, and that's okay because you know what? I genuinely like that person's energy. I like the time that I spend with them, and I like building those relationships. And if those relationships lead to a work relationship, fantastic. If it ends up just staying a personal relationship because I generally like that person, that's great too.
Yeah. We see the same thing, right? Like most people will listen to the podcast for 3 or 4 years and then they'll reach out. And I'm like, fantastic, right? Like it's a great moat. But they already know what they're getting into. Or, and two, the one thing I always tell people is, look, as an owner, you don't need to get out of sales entirely. Right. But you need to get to a point, depending on what people want. Like a lot of people want to have the option to sell one day or to go do other things and have their team take it over. So that eventually has to come. But and we told this to one of our mastermind members, Audra, and she's like, yeah, I'm a higher salesperson. I'm getting out of sales. I won't do it. But you know what? Like 3 months later, the salesperson was doing fantastic, but she was so depressed because she liked building relationships. And we said, Audra, just be in the conversation, but just add color. Like you don't have to run everything. You just come in as the CEO and you sprinkle a little color. I mean, that's what I always did when at my agency. I'd have people set up the meeting, run the meeting, plan the agenda, the proposal, the process, all that. I would just come in and just add a little color, little stories here and there, and I was fulfilled. And that was the same thing with Audra. So I always tell people as they're building a business to not need them anymore, you still can do the stuff that you love doing. Like I always did the first meeting for the creative meetings. I didn't have to do it, but I love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. You want to be fulfilled in some way. That goes back to the question I think everybody has to ask themselves, which is, what do you really want to be doing? Yes. And for me, my goal is to always get up in the morning being excited and happy to go to work. If I ever have that moment where it's like, I don't want to go, then you have to look at what's really wrong there and get rid of whatever it is that's making you not want to get up in the morning.
Yeah. And that's a good exercise for everyone to do too. I always tell everybody, get a sheet of paper out, put their fist on it, draw a circle around your fist, spend 30 minutes writing down all the shit you don't like to do anymore outside the circle. And then after you do that, really focus on the things that you really love doing that gives you energy and put that inside. and then create a plan from it. But until you have that clarity of what you want to do and what you don't want to do, it's kind of hard to make a plan.
Yeah, totally.
So awesome. Well, Warren, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it out with a fellow agency owner. It's all just conversations. And our whole goal is just to bring you really cool guests to make you guys think and be a resource I wish I had when I was running the first agency. And if you guys want to be around really cool agency owners on a consistent basis that can see the things that you're not seeing and sharing the things that are working for them, so then you can kind of take a little bit of there, a little bit of there, go create it, and then run your agency and have, the freedom, the time, the confidence to make decisions. I'd love to have you all check out agencymastery360.com. Go there, click that little scale button. And until next time,